Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Brilliant as the Sun, a retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 3, Part 2, Two Avatars. We're going to begin Chapter 31, Entering the Human Body. Returning from hell, the living being eater enters another womb where he suffers terribly, only to suffer even more after taking birth. So this is going to be really an eye-opener for all of us, this chapter. So it would be a nice idea if we hear to it intently. I'll repeat that. Returning from hell, the living being enters another womb where he suffers terribly, only to suffer even more after taking birth. Verse 1. Kapila said, after enduring all kinds of hellish punishment, the living entity again receives a human body. Under Krishna's supervision, he is placed within the semen of a man karmically suited to be his father. Then he is put into his mother's womb to receive a body like the one in which he degraded himself to hell. Verse 2. On the first night, the ovum and sperm combine, and on the fifth night, they ferment into a bubble. On the 10th night, this develops into a form like a plum, and then gradually turns into a lump of flesh. In oviparous animals, the mixture turns into an egg. Verses 3 to 4, over the course of the next month, a head forms. At the end of 2 months, the hands, feet, and other limbs take shape. By the end of 3 months, the nails, fingers, toes, body hair, bones, and skin appear, as do the reproductive organs, eyes, nostrils, ears, mouth, and anus. Within 4 months from the date of conception, the 7 essential ingredients of the body come into existence. These are chyle, blood, flesh, fat, bone, marrow, and semen. After 5 months, the fetus experiences hunger and thirst. At the end of 6 months, the child enclosed by the amnion begins to move. Male children move to the right side of the mother's abdomen, female children on the left side. Verse 5, as he grows in the womb, which is polluted with the stools and urine and infested with the different types of worms, the child derives nutrition from the food and drink consumed by the mother. From the 7th month, he is conscious. Listen now to what the Jiva experiences when taking a human birth. Verse 6, Jiva slowly opened his eyes. Murky darkness enveloped him, permeated by a dim light. He was bent over, unable to move. Sharp, stinging pains came from all over his body. Straining his eyes, he caught a glimpse of translucent worms. He could feel them biting his arms, legs, back, and abdomen. The pain was unbearable. He blacked out. Regaining consciousness a few moments later, he was once more overcome by the agony of their biting. Again, he fainted. Verses 7 to 8. Gradually, he grew accustomed to that pain through the darkness. He often heard voices, in particular a female voice. He could hear her chew and swallow. Jiva dreaded that sound. As soon after, he frequently experienced intolerable burning sensations all over his body. This pain was different from the worm bites. It felt as if his body was on fire. There was no relief. He was compressed helplessly. His back and neck were arched like a bow towards his belly. Verse 9. Trapped and unable to move, he closed his eyes in exhaustion. Then the visions began. He saw a king, powerful and proud. A voice from deep within him said, "This was you." The vision disappeared. He saw a frail and beautiful woman. "This too was you." That vision faded. And he saw a beggar lying in the street. "He was also you." He saw 100 such visions, each different. Some appeared pious, some like criminals, some male and some female, some rich and powerful, some poverty-stricken, even some animal species. Each time the voice within said, "This was you." When the visions ended, Jiva was distraught, for each was accompanied by vivid memories, mostly painful memories of betrayal and betraying, of dashed hopes, fleeting joys and intense grief, and of fearful death. He sobbed soundlessly. Gradually he calmed himself. Where am I? The voice within replied. You are in your mother's womb. He convulsed with sorrow. No, no, not again. Verses 10 to 11, Jiva felt himself being pushed downwards by powerful airs. His only companions were the worms who continued to bite him. As his heart pounded in fear, the small voice from deep within comforted him. O spirit soul, remember me, your friend, your Lord. These words invoked new memories. He remembered meeting saintly persons. They had exhorted him to serve the personality of Godhead Krishna. Remembering their instructions, he struggled to bring his two small hands together in prayer. Verses 12 and 13, I take shelter of the Supreme Lord's lotus feet, appearing in his eternal forms. He walks upon the earth for his pastimes. He has rightly placed me in this awful condition due to my wicked behavior, and I surrender unto him. For only he can give me relief. Although I am a pure spiritual being, forced by my karma, I am once again trapped in a material body, offered by the material energy. I bow to the Lord, who, though present with me as a super soul, is unaffected and unchanged by material conditions. That unlimited Supreme Person is seen by one with a repentant heart. Verses 14 and 15, this material body, made of 5 elements, obscures my spiritual nature, which is qualitatively the same as Krishna's. Because he is full of knowledge and the supreme controller, he remains transcendental. His glorious spiritual qualities are never diminished. Therefore, I offer him my humble obeisance. Due to forgetting Krishna, I am continually placed under material nature's influence. In this condition, I am forced to endure a hard struggle for existence, birth after birth. Unless the Lord shows me his causeless mercy, I cannot resume my position as his eternal servant. Verses 16 to 19, as the super soul, he controls everything past, present and future. By his direction, conditioned souls are engaged in material activities, and only by his grace can we get free of the threefold miseries of life. Even as he prayed, the stench of the foul mixture within the womb overcame him. There was nowhere he could turn to escape it. Then his mother swallowed, and the heat of her gastric fire scorched him. He wept bitterly. My Lord, when shall I, a wretched soul, be released from this confinement? Although I am only 10 months old, by a causeless mercy I can remember you, friend of all souls. I can only express my gratitude by repeatedly praying to you with folded hands. Unlike the lower species of life, which act only by instinct, humans can control their senses and understand life's goal. I therefore offer my respect to Lord Krishna, who has blessed me with this human body, and by whose grace I have the intelligence to see him acting both within and outside of me. As he prayed, Jiva realized that at least while in the womb, he could remember Krishna. That was not guaranteed when he came out. There was every chance he would again become covered by the Lord's illusory energy. Verses 20 and 21, anxiously he prayed, My Lord, although in a terrible condition, I do not want to take birth, because I fear I will once more forget you and fall into the deep well of material life. Your illusory energy will again force me to accept a false identity and continue in the cycle of birth and death. Therefore, peacefully accepting this situation, I shall deliver myself from the darkness of ignorance by remaining always absorbed in Krishna consciousness. By constantly thinking of Vishnu's lotus feet, I shall be saved from entering womb after womb. Verse 22, even as Jiva prayed in this way, the wind of parturition suddenly propelled him downward head first. Devahuti and her maidservants gasped. They had never imagined how much suffering the unborn child experiences. A tear trickling from the corner of her eye, Devahuti whispered, Does he forget you as he feared? Verses 23 and 24, Kapila replied, The severe pain of birth makes him forget everything. The agony of being forcefully pushed through the narrow birth canal is so severe that the child can barely even breathe, falling into a pool of blood and urine. He squirms like a worm in a stool. He cries helplessly, his superior intelligence lost. Verses 25 to 27, he is then given into the care of his guardians, but he cannot communicate his needs. He cries because he is hungry, but his carers think he has stomachache and give him bitter medicine. He must accept whatever he is given, even though he desires something else. It is a most unpleasant situation. Sometimes he soils himself and is obliged to lay on that contaminated bed. Although his tender skin itches terribly, he cannot scratch himself nor get relief by sitting, standing, or even moving. A smaller worms bite a larger worm. Gnats, mosquitoes, bugs, and germs bite the baby's delicate body. Completely forgetting the wisdom he attained in the womb, he cries bitterly. Verses 28 and 29, he thus passes his first 5 years of childhood suffering all kinds of distress. Even when he reaches the middle years of childhood, from 6 to 15, when he has more self-mastery, he continues to suffer. He may be forced to go to a school he hates or study when he wants to play. Sometimes he craves something, but his parents will not get it for him. Forgetful of his real self, these frustrations give him misery and make him angry. As he becomes older, he is prone to spiritual degradation. Due to pride, he becomes angry and fights with other similarly avaricious people. Verses 30 and 31, the root of his grief is that he foolishly misidentifies himself with his material body. He further compounds his problems by believing that anything associated with his body belongs to him. Although the material body is a source of constant trouble, he identifies with it because he has forgotten his real self-interest is to satisfy Krishna, and because of the force of his karmic destiny due to this misidentification, he continues to act in ways which further subject him to repeated birth and death. Verses 32 and 33, if he keeps company with those who are merely interested in sensual gratification like eating and sex, he becomes sinful and once more descends to hell. Even if he was brought up a religious person, by bad association he loses all his good qualities like truthfulness, cleanliness, mercy, gravity, spiritual intelligence, shyness, austerity, fame, forgiveness, control of the mind, control of the senses, and all his prosperity. Devahuti wondered what was meant by bad association. Verses 34 and 35, Kapila said one should never associate with those who are sinful, violent, devoid of spiritual knowledge, and attached to sex pleasure. The aspiring transcendentalist must especially avoid the association of those attached to sex. This attachment is the most dangerous, for it fully enamors one and keeps him bound in the cycle of repeated birth and death. Verses 36 to 38, even Brahma was overwhelmed by the lusty feelings on seeing his own daughter. She did not encourage him, but rather taking the form of a hind, she fled. Still, he was so infatuated that he assumed the form of a stag and chased her. Among all the beings created by Brahma, only the sage Narayan is immune to the attraction of my illusory energy in the form of a female. Just try to understand a woman's power. By merely moving her eyebrows, she can bring under her control great kings who have conquered the world. Devahuti frowned in confusion. If a woman's association is so degrading, why do the Vedas endorse marriage? Verses 39 to 40, Kapila explained that marriage was recommended for men already attracted to women. It helped regulate the limit their association. However, the Brahman realized yogi who desires to attain Krishna must rigorously avoid attractive women, for they are declared by scriptures to be the gateway back into the cycle of repeated birth and death. Such a yogi should not even accept service from a woman, seeing her as the Lord's illusory potency. As a heedless man falls into a grass-covered well, so the transcendentalist who is not cautious to avoid female association falls again into ignorance, forgetful of his true self. Devahuti's heart ached, tears welled up her in her dark eyes? Why were women portrayed as a man's enemy? Were they not spirit souls who could also be Krishna's devotees? Was she intrinsically wicked just because she inhabited a woman's body? Verses 41 and 42, Kapila said, Mother, it is not a question of either men or women being wicked. It's simply a matter of what keeps us entangled in the material life. A man becomes attached to a woman for her service, her beauty, and her other assets. Then in his next life, he gets a female body. The woman then becomes attached to a man and to what he gives her, like a home, children, and wealth. This keeps her bound up in material existence, just as a hunter sings sweetly to lure deer to their destruction. Similarly, the illusory energy presents a woman with a husband, children, and home just to keep her attached to the world of death. Devahuti wiped away her tears. Kardam would have known this. He had left because it was best for them both. She looked at Kapila's effulgent face. His instructions were her only hope. She focused her mind again as he continued to speak. Verses 43 and 44. In illusion, the living being wanders life after life from planet to planet in different species due to his karmic destiny. He continuously tries to enjoy the results of his work and therefore perpetuates his bondage. According to his acts, he is awarded bodies endowed with the appropriate mind and senses. When a chapter of his karma comes to an end, that is called death. And when a new chapter begins, it is called birth. Verses 45 and 46, death simply means that the material senses no longer function. The senses also sometimes stop working due to disease. For example, one may become blind. However, the seer remains. Similarly, death means the bodily senses no longer function. However, the person who enjoyed those senses still exists. When one receives a new set of senses with which he again begins to identify, that is called birth. Verse 47, therefore, knowing that he is different from the material body, one should neither fear death nor fall prey to excessive sense indulgence. Understanding himself to be Krishna's eternal servant, he should give up this misconception that he is the lord of material nature. He should be satisfied with whatever Krishna offers him without much personal endeavor and be careful to utilize everything in the Lord's service. Devahuti sighed. This was easier said than done. Verse 48, Kapila seemed to exude compassion. You will succeed if you always contemplate the teachings of liberated souls about life's real problems. Also hear from them about me and discuss their teachings. You will thereby become detached from bodily identification. You will understand that the material body is the illusory energy's creation. That is the Maya. Therefore, losing interest in worldly enjoyment and becoming impervious to bodily disturbances, finally after death you will enter my eternal kingdom. The sun was high in the sky and a warm breeze blew across the veranda. Kapila suggested his mother go inside where it was cooler. Rest and refresh yourselves, he said. I shall come again and join you again later. After Kapila left, Devahuti took a light lunch in the company of her friends. Afterwards, they discussed the morning's discourse. Rangini said, what did he mean by threefold miseries? I once heard a sage describe those, said Medha. One type of suffering comes from one's own body and mind, another from other living beings, and the third from natural phenomena such as heat and cold. That's right, said Devahuti. They are respectively called Adhyatmika, Adhibhautika and Adhidaivika. Kardam told me about this also. As the lady spoke, a messenger arrived from Devahuti's sister Prasuti. Her daughter Sati had killed herself due to her father's neglect. Shiva had sent the powerful Veerbhadra to avenge his wife's death. He explained in detail the havoc wreaked on Daksha's sacrifice. Your sister Prasuti is distraught. Her husband now has a goat's head. That was King Daksha. Devahuti could hardly believe her ears. She knew Daksha was prone to pride, but in other ways he was a most religious and a dutiful man. How had such misfortune befallen him? So, if this chapter, chapter 31, entering the human body doesn't open our eyes for the devotional service, we don't know what will open our eyes. So we have to be mindful of our situation in this material world, why we are here and what's the reason we have been given the human body, and strive not to come again into this incessant cycle of birth and death and the miseries our souls. The soul doesn't go through misery, but the body, the vehicle, it suffers, and our soul also suffers because we are blind to the bounties of the devotional service. So thank you for joining. We will resume chapter 32 next time, which is Lord Kapila's final instructions. They are very nice as well, like the whole Bhagavatam, of course. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.